One of the most difficult things I ever had to do in my life was to seal caves that people were still alive in. And these people were Okinawans or Japanese soldiers who had taken safety in the cave and would not come out. The civilians had been told that the Marines were barbarians, so they chose not to come out of those caves. And the cave that they wouldn't come out of, it was my job to seal it forever.
You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
To meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
My name is Watson Crumbie, and I'm 97 years old, being born during the Great Depression. I was 16 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And I joined the Marines when I was 18. Went through World War II, called back to the Korean War. Some type of a legend because I've been through 7 battles and no Purple Heart. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, we didn't have any television. And the radio was, the only thing you could hear on the radio was Pearl Harbor was bombed, and the newspapers were selling extras saying, extra, extra, read all about it. No one knew where Pearl Harbor was, but we found out shortly, and I found out that my lifelong playmate who lived just across the street from me and another in the block down the street that were both on the USS Arizona had been killed. And that was my first reaction to want revenge for their deaths. So on my 18th birthday, I was called up to active duty. And when I reported, I found that 4 other Marines, classmates, I should say, from high school, or all 5 of us were going at the same time. And that shows you the patriotism of the nation at that time. When I joined the Marines, all 5 of us were sent to San Diego, where we went through boot camp together. We all were trained in different reasons. I went in as a light machine gun, trained on light machine gun and an explosive. I became a infantry assault demolitionist was my title. And I carried a 20-pound satchel, 20-pound satchel of high explosives to use on pillboxes and caves. After boot camp, as I say, we all did 6 weeks of training somewhere, and I was sent overseas in December, so that was August to December before we were sent overseas. And we became the 1st Battalion, 29th Marine Regiment, attached to the 2nd Marine Division, where our first battle, our first combat, was on Saipan. Higgins boats, you climb down a rope ladder, full combat gear, helmet, rifle, and everything. And a Higgins boat has a ramp on front, but it tosses and flips a lot when you're climbing down that rope, and you have to time it just right for when the boat comes up to jump into it. And then they circle until they take us some 2,000 yards out. We climb out of the Higgins boats and then into an amphibious tractor. And the ones we used on Saipan did not have the rear ramps, so we had to climb up and over the sides. I was the first one on our side, and what I saw was 3 dead Marines. And one hand was floating up and down as the wave would come in, and it was like, go back, or hello, or whatever it meant, but that's something that's burned in my mind for all these years. And those Marines were probably in the first wave. We were in about the fifth wave. We didn't see any resistance at that point. But that night, I had a Japanese soldier come from behind where he'd been hiding all day and stop at the foot of my foxhole. I said to myself, can I swing the rifle around and shoot him before he shoots me? But he was looking down at me, and I was looking up at him. We couldn't see each other's eyes because of our helmets, but there was a flare going off. And as soon as the flare burned out, the soldier started to run, and the Marine in the foxhole next to us shot and killed him. And my foxhole buddy, I don't think ever forgave me for allowing a Japanese soldier to stop at our foxhole, step over our foxhole.
If you're enjoying this video, you should join our exclusive Patreon community to receive early access to videos each week, the chance to send questions to our heroes, and much more. We scour the country to identify, film, share, and preserve these first-hand battlefield accounts, and time is of the essence. To join our mission, visit patreon.com/American Veterans Center or click the link in our description. It's up to each of us to guard their legacy and honor their sacrifice. Thanks, and now back to the interview.
On the third day, we came to a ridge that led us up to a mountain, Mount Spatio, 1,550 feet high. It was the highest peak on the island. And we passed an artillery piece during the day, but we didn't disable it. And that night when we dug in, that artillery piece, the Japanese snuck back, I guess you'd say, used that artillery piece on us, firing from behind. We thought that it was our own artillery. So we were sending up green flares saying friendly troops. It was a perfect aiming spot for the Japanese soldiers. And when we started to dig in that night, my foxhole was between two big boulders, and I thought we couldn't find a safer place than that. But the captain came up and said that's going to be company headquarters for the night, so we'd have to move out. And my buddy and I, James P. Thompson, we couldn't dig in, so we made we'd put whatever we could, rocks in front of us, and made our foxhole outside the left boulder. But during the night, an artillery shell landed directly in the middle between those two boulders and killed our captain and several others. And hot shrapnel landed on me. That's how close that they got. So the next day, when dawn came, we lost 40 men that night. When dawn came, the Army tanks were firing on us. So it was pure chaos. Anyhow, our company had gone up the ridge and found it was undefended. The Japanese had abandoned it. As an infantry assault demolitionist, life expectancy of a demolitionist in combat is measured in minutes. We were a four-man team. One was a flamethrower. The other was a VA Armament. That was a Browning automatic rifle. And he provided the firing cover, the protection to keep the Japanese down until we could get to the cave. And not every cave did we use a flamethrower on. Not every cave did we use a demolition on. But there were a lot of caves that were on the side of a cliff that neither one of us could get to. In those caves, I'd use a bazooka on. In one cave, I was credited with 14 Japanese soldiers. And most of the time, we would, I was called up on for a couple of Japanese pillboxes with machine guns. And the fuse on a 20-pound charge of dynamite, of explosive, was 15 seconds. And you think that's short, but it's not. You can run a long ways in 15 seconds. But you didn't want to run because you could be shot. So I'd count to 8 before I'd throw the charge into a pillbox. But I kind of chickened out on a couple of them and threw it fast, and it worked okay. And I could carry that satchel charge. It took more than, it would take a machine gun to set it off, so I wasn't really too concerned if a bullet hit it. But in the daytime, we were just plain infantry attacking against stubborn Japanese forces. But we came across, after we went up on the mountaintop, an abandoned Japanese hospital, and there were still dead Japanese in it. Some of them had been had lost their arms or legs or whatnot. And I remember, this doesn't sound good, but the maggots climbing and clawing, eating the flesh of those dead Japanese. We were on the front lines for 20 days, 20 straight days, 20 straight nights. My foxhole buddy I met some years later told me about how I would line up 2 clouds of dirt on a rock or on a tree or something, because every night trees move, rocks move, and I put on these 2 clouds of dirt, I could sight on them and find out if they really moved. And I had forgotten all about that. But you can't describe combat, because there's the smell of death, and there's the probability that you're going to get hit or killed. But after 20 days, we had landed with 1,000 men, and after 20 days in combat, we only had 200 left. After Saipan, we went to Guadalcanal, where we formed. We were the 6th Marine Division. The 2 other battalions of 29th Marines had formed in the States, and were already waiting for us to join the 1st Battalion, and we became the 6th Marine Division, where we trained to invade the island of Okinawa. We landed on Okinawa April 1st, 1945. Easy to remember because it was Easter Sunday, but it was also April Fool. And when we landed, we expected to meet the Japanese on the beach. Many, many, many casualties, because it was 300 miles from the homeland of Japan, and we felt that they would have a force there waiting for us. But there was no opposition. We landed, and then we couldn't figure out where or why the Japanese, where they went to. And that night, we were expecting a huge counterattack. So we had 4-man foxholes. And during the night, some civilians came through the cornfield, and one foxhole with 4 men abandoned the foxhole and ran for the other 4, hopefully to put up a better line of defense. But one of them was shot and killed. It was our first casualty on Okinawa. And I saw a person running down the cornfield. I took the safety off my rifle and was ready to shoot it. And my buddy in the foxhole tapped me on the shoulder and said, it's a shadow. A flare was going off, and it was casting a shadow on a telephone pole that looked like somebody running down the field, and that's what I was about to shoot. So nothing but shadows for a whole week. 7 days before we went to northern Okinawa. 7 days before we knew there were any Japanese there. And we were in a column going down the road when they ambushed us. And they got our dog first, they got the dog handler second, then they got the officers. And then they disappeared. It was a guerrilla-type action on northern Okinawa. We would send out patrols in company size and get reports to go to the aid of A Company because they were under ambush, had been ambushed. Well, by the time we got to A Company, the Japanese were gone. And at nighttime, they had taken, there was a Navy base, they had taken the 20 millimeter or 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns up into the mountains, and they were using those on us, which was very demoralizing because those shells would explode in the air. But the big battle was not in the northern end. On the northern end, we had the big the battleships. The Virginia was firing over our head, and you could see a 3,000-pound artillery shell from a battleship going over your head, which was very comforting because naval fire is very accurate. And we secured it and then sent south. And that's where the Japanese general had decided to make a bloodbath out of it so that the United States would feel like it was too bloody to invade Japan. They had dug under caves all across the narrow part of the island, and they had made branches out of from each one, so that when we attacked, they would go down into the caves and have lunch while the artillery would land on the mountaintop. Even the mighty Missouri would send 16-inch shells to land on that mountaintop, but they didn't affect the Japanese at all. Then when we started up, they'd come out to the open, or to the top of their defenses and shoot us, defend their mountaintop. That was called Sugarloaf Hill. And that was the basis of the entire line of defense across the island. And we took that hill 11 times in 7 days, and of course lost it 10. And by the time that we had been, after a week, we had lost so many men that we were down to about 50 men in the company, which was not in every company. And we finally broke the line of defense by going around the base on a flanking movement. And when we did, the Army tanks opened up on us. But once we took Sugarloaf, which was a series of 3 hills, 3 hills could defend each other hill. But after we took those hills, we found the caves, and we were credited with breaking the line of defense. One of the most difficult things I ever had to do in my life was to seal caves that people were still alive in. And these people were Okinawans or Japanese soldiers who had taken safety in the cave and would not come out. They used megahorns, whatever you call them, loudspeakers, to try to tell them that they wouldn't be harmed. But they had been told, the civilians had been told, that the Marines were barbarians, so they chose not to come out of those caves. And the cave that they wouldn't come out of, it was my job to seal it forever. we happened to be on the island when the monsoon season hit, and we could get 10 inches of rain in no time, which made life so miserable because we didn't have shelter. And I can remember one incident where my foxhole was full of water. Artillery shells were landing all around, so you had to stay in your foxhole. And life was so miserable. I remember saying that I envied the dead. And I can remember myself sitting in his foxhole with a little sea ration can, bailing the water out, and the tears just rolling down my cheeks because life was so miserable. But I knew that there was a tomorrow, and I was going to do everything I could to survive for that tomorrow. On Saipan, that was the first island that we had civilians on. And the same thing there. They had told the population that we were barbarians and we'd capture and kill them or rape them and all that. So I think it was like 5,000 civilians went to a cliff which became Bonsai Cliff, named that civilians would jump to their deaths from. And I think there were like 5,000 civilians that jumped to their death there. The same thing happened in Okinawa, where they weren't in caves. They went to the end of the island, and another number of the civilians jumped to their deaths. I was in an area where there was a little bit of underbrush, but all around it was coral. And as I approached that, I don't know what I was doing over there by myself, but as I approached it, I heard a grenade, and I dropped to the ground expecting to see it come toward me. But instead, the two Japanese were in there, and it was honorable for them to die rather than to be captured. And one of them had held a grenade to his chin. He was dead, the other was alive. And when I shot him, a family came running out. One of the daughters had lost part of her breast from shrapnel, and when they came out, I knew then that there were no more Japanese around. The battle for Okinawa lasted 82 days, and that was one of the longest battles of the Pacific in the World War II. Our Navy lost a ship a day, and the Navy couldn't leave us because we had to depend on their support for our attack. At the end of 82 days, we were taken to Guam. We had not showered, we had shaved, and when we got to the ship, the Navy sailors were holding their noses, saying, "We don't want you aboard our ship." But we got to Guam, and we were training to invade the big island of Japan. We were to land at Tokyo Bay, and we knew that there would be thousands or millions of casualties, and it was going to be one of the most dangerous amphibious attacks ever. So we were sitting on coconut logs, you might say, that they made makeshift seats out of to watch a movie. And one night we were waiting for the movie to start, and they announced over the PA system that a bomb had destroyed an entire city. Huh? Well, we laughed. We said, they used a blockbuster or something or other, and that's what they're really excited about. We've used blockbusters before, and then we found out later that it was an atom bomb that had been dropped. And then when Japan surrendered, finally, after the second bomb was dropped, they announced, President Truman announced that that Japan had accepted surrender, and that was at 10 o'clock at night on Guam. The band broke out, and they were playing the Marine hymn, Marching in the Tent Rose, and we were all out there singing and hollering, the war's over. We're going home.